government shutdown is over. The end of the government shutdown is a victory for the 800,000 plus federal employees who were needlessly being held hostage. It's a victory for farmers and small business people, individuals who needed mortgage assistance, as well as those who were food insecure, and millions of other Americans who rely on a functioning federal government to make sure they have the quality of life that they deserve. The end of the reckless government shutdown is a victory for the American people because shutdowns are entirely unacceptable as a negotiating tactic. If there are disagreements between the Congress and the White House, we should work through those public policy issues without holding federal employees and the American people hostage. Our message right now is keep the government open and allow both sides of the aisle through the conference committee process that has been put into place to work its will. House Democrats support 21st century border security. We support additional investment in infrastructure, particularly as it relates to our legal ports of entry. We support additional personnel, particularly as it relates to customs. We support additional investment in technology as it relates to sensors, scanners, drones, satellites, enhanced communication capability, because these are the things that the experts have said will make our border more secure. Yes, we have a broken immigration system. Yes, we need comprehensive immigration reform. Yes, we should fix it in a bipartisan way, but we can never have a mature conversation about these tough issues in the midst of a reckless shutdown. We hope that that question is now closed. I'm also pleased that we are able to continue to focus on kitchen table pocketbook issues important to the American people under the umbrella of our For the People agenda. There's no more important issue to the American people as they communicated to us last November than making sure we lower health care costs, protect people with pre-existing conditions, and find a way to dramatically reduce the high cost of life-saving prescription drugs. This week, House Democrats are moving forward aggressively with that agenda. The Ways and Means Committee is holding a hearing with respect to protecting people with pre-existing conditions under the leadership of Chairman Richie Neal. The Oversight and Government Reform Committee is holding a hearing with respect to lowering the high cost of prescription drugs under the leadership of Chair Elijah Cummings, and we will move forward aggressively to lower health care costs on behalf of the American people. Let me now yield to my distinguished Vice Chair, Katherine Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it is good to be with you today. And the Democrats have one focus, and that's the American people and their needs. And on the top of that agenda is addressing health care. We heard it from the midterms. I know traveling across this country, whether in East Coast, the heartland, red or blue states, healthcare was the priority issue that came out of the 2018 midterms. Whether you're young people and students who want to stay on parents' healthcare plans, the seniors who rely on Medicare for life-saving treatment and daily prescriptions, cancer patients, children with asthma, mothers, daughters, sister, and wives who are thankful that having a pre-existing condition or simply being a woman no longer means denied coverage. Americans want to know that Congress understands that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. And this week, as the chairman outlined, our committees are beginning to do their work addressing this priority issue. The Energy and Commerce Committee will be holding a hearing on the Texas court case attacking the rights guaranteed in the ACA. The Committee on Oversight and Reform is investigating the actions of drug companies in raising prescription drug prices in the United States, as well as the effect of these actions on federal and state budgets and American families. And today, the Ways and Means Committee is holding the very first hearing, which will be about our role in protecting Americans with pre-existing conditions. Our work has begun. We will not stop working for the American people, and I am very glad that we are going to have a chance today to hear from Congressman Chuy Garcia, who knows what healthcare means to his constituents in Chicago and is going to share that with you today. Chuy?
Thank you, Catherine and caucus chair. Glad to stand here with our caucus leadership, knowing that the government is open and that now we have a responsibility and a duty to address the issues that we were sent to Washington to address, including ensuring that we address the rising cost of health care and the financial burden for American families, especially for working class districts like the constituents that I represent in the 4th District of Illinois. As a matter of fact, by March of 2017, Republicans had voted over 50 times attempting to repeal the Affordable Care Act. This is unconscionable because they, as well as President Trump, have actively been trying to sabotage it. Let me tell you what the Affordable Care Act and the expansion of Medicaid have done for places like Cook County, where I served as a county commissioner. Since we created, as a result of the expansion of Medicare, a program called County Care, we have enrolled over 330,000 people in Cook County alone. These are individuals who 3 years ago were uninsured. It has helped stabilize our health system and ensure that people have coverage. I support a Medicare for All system in our country. I have long held this belief that only having a universal system of healthcare coverage in our country will help everyone guarantee access to healthcare. We have 30 million uninsured people still in our country today. In my district alone, I have over 115,000 uninsured individuals. The Affordable Care Act enabled 58,000 people in my district alone to become insured. So those are the important aspects of it. But I support a Medicare for All system because I think it's time that we take the profit-making motive out of healthcare, and we see it happening with big pharma. We see hospitals participating in this system, and of course, insurance companies. That's why I support a single-payer system in our country. We must guarantee that protections for pre-existing conditions and essential health benefits are made to everyone. This means requiring all health plans to cover the essential health benefits included in the law and prohibit insurance companies from imposing lifetime and annual limits on the amount of care a patient can have. We must lower the cost of prescription drugs. Congress must pass a law that allows Medicare to negotiate drug prices for all beneficiaries and stop gouging by requiring drug manufacturers to give notice and justify significant price increases and require transparency and rebate amounts. To finalize, an example of how providers, nonprofit providers in my district deal with people. Under the Affordable Care Act, the number of patients that have access to health care has increased and doubled in my district. Erie Family Health Center, for example, now serves 68,000 patients, and 63% of them are on Medicaid. Patients of Erie who have pre-existing conditions should not live in fear of losing their coverage. Latinos are at a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, placing a large percentage of the population in my district at risk. This is why constituents have been asking me to support legislation to make insulin affordable. This can be the difference between life and death of many people. The cost of insulin nearly doubled from 2012 to 2016, putting patients in my district at risk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chewy.
Mr. Jeffries, thank you. Given that Democrats voted for the CR that's in place that funds new fencing, repairing existing fencing, et cetera, can you just describe what type of barriers along the border you will be willing to support in the course of this conference negotiation?
I don't want to get out ahead of the negotiators who've been appointed to the conference committee, but I think we've consistently said that we do not support a medieval border wall from sea to shining sea. However, we are willing to support fencing where it makes sense, but it should be done in an evidence-based fashion.
Congressman, last week before this deal was reached between the President and Congress, Democrats were going to put forward at least $5.7 billion of border security on the table for the President. Is that kind of centering where the negotiations stand? And also, is Democratic leadership behind legislation to ensure that the last shutdown was the final shutdown?
Well, we've consistently taken the position that there should be no more reckless shutdowns where we hold the American people hostage, and we're willing to consider a variety of different legislative proposals that have been made to ensure that that's a reality. With respect to what's on the table and what's off the table, I think we've approached these negotiations with an open mind. We have incredibly skilled members of Congress who are practiced in the art at arriving at a bipartisan agreement. Democrats support real 21st century border security along the lines that I previously outlined, which include additional investments in infrastructure, investing in the Coast Guard, investing in additional personnel where it makes sense, particularly given the shortage of customs agents, and certainly as it relates to investing in technology. Senator, thanks.
The president also had threatened if he doesn't get wall funding that one of the options besides another shutdown is a national emergency. The administration seems to be leaning toward that route. Obviously, Democrats have expressed concerns about that. Can you talk about what actions you guys would take? Would you potentially pass legislation to prevent him from doing that? Would you file a lawsuit? What are you guys looking at as he considers that option?
I don't want to speculate about what the president may or may not do, but he should proceed with caution, as his conservative allies have indicated before going down the route of declaring a national emergency. First of all, it's clear that there is no national emergency at the border. It's a manufactured crisis similar to the one that the president attempted to manufacture with the so-called caravans that were invading our nation in advance of November. That said, we want to try to find a negotiated resolution to improving our border security, but do it in a constructive way, absent the threat of a negotiated resolution. There should not be the threat, I should say, that he's going to declare a national emergency or shut down the government again.
Mr. Jeffrey, what I'm hearing from you today is that you understand that a bipartisan compromise is likely to include some money for physical barriers. Do you think that would create any unrest with the more progressive members of your caucus?
I don't want to characterize what's likely and what's not likely, other than the line in the sand that has been drawn with respect to a medieval concrete border wall that is a 5th century solution to a 21st century problem. In the past, we have supported enhanced fencing, but I don't want to say what we will or will not support in the context of this upcoming agreement without understanding the totality of the agreement.
I'd like to add one story that I heard recently from Secretary Johnson. about a portion of the border that has existing steel slatted walling, which very similar to one of the many proposals the president appears to support. It's a little hard to negotiate with a plan that keeps changing. But he described that without the right personnel and technology, meaning sensors on this portion of wall, the cartels were able to blow a hole through it that was large enough that they could drive their vehicles unimpeded through it. So when Democrats are looking at border security, we're looking at how do we really address the needs of the border. Right now, we have existing fencing, barriers, levees at different points. But what we aren't going to do is use taxpayer money to fund a political applause line. I think that we're hopeful that bringing together in a bipartisan way this conference committee, we can come up with border security proposals that truly keep our borders secure. I know coming from a state that is deeply affected by the opioid crisis, we know those drugs come through our ports, and that's why we have been clear that it is time to pay the Coast Guard that has a major role in drug interdiction and make sure that we have the best technology for detecting the flow of fentanyl and heroin through our ports. So we are open to what is going to work to keep our country secure. And what we've seen this president willing to do is create a national security crisis with this shutdown. So we're hopeful that he has seen what happened with the shutdown and will come to the table in good faith to really make sure we're investing our dollars where they will be effective.
I'll go to the front. I'm sorry, front and then the back.
Thanks, sir. As part of these discussions, do you include this conversation about ending shutdowns, or does that come after the conference committee and the spending bills are?
Well, we hope that the question about reckless government shutdowns is a settled issue given the political disaster that it was for the president and the other side of the aisle. His own colleagues in the Senate on the Republican side of the aisle have made clear, apparently, that shutdowns should no longer be a viable option, particularly after this most recent 35-day government shutdown. So we believe that the right approach legislatively is to focus on border security using evidence and experts to help figure out the contours of what we should be able to do to secure our borders. We're going to the back, and then
Congressman, with the Mueller probe wrapping up, can you talk a little bit about how the Judiciary Committee will be approaching the question of impeachment, and if there are any circumstances in which swift action would be appropriate?
well, in our view, we fought for the appointment of a special counsel. Rod Rosenstein appointed that special counsel, who's a tremendous American, Bob Mueller, who's been doing a phenomenal job in terms of his investigation. We should allow that investigation to run its course. And then when it's concluded, he can report to the American people, report to Congress, as well as obviously report to the Department of Justice his findings, and we can determine how to proceed from there.
Judiciary Committee doing its own investigations, its own hearings?
Well, today the Judiciary Committee right now is having a hearing on H.R. 1, so we can begin the process of ending the era of voter suppression in the United States of America. We're going to continue to focus on the things that we promised the American people that we would focus on: lowering health care costs, increasing pay for everyday Americans through a real infrastructure plan, and cleaning up corruption and bringing our democracy to life. Cheryl?
Congressman, the Senate is likely to pass its anti-BDS bill this week, and at the same time, Republicans have been condemning two of your freshmen, Representatives Tlaib and Omar, for their views on Israel. So, kind of a two-parter. First, is the House likely to take up the Senate's bill? And also, are you concerned, or do you think they're worthy, those two are worthy of your condemnation? Today, the Daily Caller has reported that Congresswoman Tlaib has a key fundraiser who's espoused anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
Well, I'm not sure what the Daily Caller has or has not said. I found those two new freshman members to be thoughtful colleagues on a wide variety of issues. We can have a robust debate on domestic policy and on foreign policy. I can say that the overwhelming majority of the House Democratic caucus is strongly pro-Israel. That said, we are not going to allow the Senate Republicans to move legislation forward that really is a political stunt and not a serious effort at advancing American foreign policy interests. That's the perspective of Chairman Eliot Engel.
I want to try and tidy up this question of legislation to outlaw shutdowns, because my goal here is to actually address the issue of legislation, not just the political process that you talked of where you thought you addressed it. There's already at least one bill in that's calling for a legislative approach to end it. So, very specifically, so we could just, button this down, will you support moving legislation to end shutdowns? And there's various approaches, automatic CRs, whatever. So can we nail this, please?
I think the House Democratic Caucus strongly supports the end of using shutdowns as a negotiating tactic. With respect to the specifics of that legislation, I'm not going to comment one way or the other because there are a variety of proposals that we need to have a healthy debate on moving forward. Today, we are passing a resolution that makes our general posture clear, which is that shutdowns are a stupid thing.
But I just want to press, because that is kind of a dodge, and Huey knows that we don't put up with this kind of thing usually, so he's used to this, right, Huey, you can tell him.
Tough folks from Chicago.
Yeah, what you just said was a dodge. So can you kind of try to button it down? Just what's your, I'm not asking about the specific approach, but I'm like the third reporter here who has kind of wanted to get you to say, at least in principle, should there be some legislative solution to just take this off the table as a bargaining chip?
Yes, I think I've said that in a variety of different ways.
Well, okay, and do you have any idea what you think your legislative approach might be, or either of you two?
No, I think my role as caucus chair is to make sure that all of the legislative proposals get a robust hearing amongst the House Democratic leadership, as well as the rank and file members, led by the respective committee chairs. That's why it would be unfair of me to sort of weigh in at this juncture.
The conference team is staffed with expert negotiators, but the president's a wild card. So what has the conversation been with your...
That may be the understatement of the day.
What has the conversation been about working with your Republican colleagues to ensure that he does end up approving whatever bipartisan compromise you may reach?
Well, the president is certainly a wild card, and it's hard to tell what position he may adopt from day to day. The process that has been put forward right now is one that we are wholeheartedly embracing, and we just want to give that process the space so that the members can work their will and then make their recommendations on a bipartisan basis to the House, the Senate, Democrats, and Republicans. And hopefully, the president will see his way clear to supporting whatever comes out of that conference committee. The House and the Senate are separate and co-equal branches of government. It's a good thing that Mitch McConnell emerged from the Witness Protection Program to help lead the Senate forward, beginning with those 2 votes. And the day after, we were able to find common ground and end the reckless shutdown. It seems to me that that is the formula for how we should move forward. The Senate cannot conduct itself like a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump administration, or we will find ourselves back in a situation where one person is determining the outcome of whether we can arrive at bipartisan negotiations, and that's not the constitutional system that was envisioned by the Founding Fathers. Last question.
So last night, Senator Kamala Harris endorsed Medicare for All, but also seemed to advocate for the elimination of private insurance plans as we know it. Is that where most Democrats are?
I think it's too early to comment, one, on proposals being floated by any presidential candidate. Certainly, Senator Harris is someone I have great respect for, and she's had a phenomenal rollout over the last week. Democrats are united behind the principle that we should lower health care costs for the American people, protect people with pre-existing conditions, and begin that conversation with a focus on lowering the high cost of life-saving prescription drugs. Democrats are united behind legislation that will give the federal government, through Medicare, as Chuy Garcia mentioned, the ability to use its bulk price purchasing power to negotiate lower drug prices for the American people. That's our starting point. Eventually, I think we all support the concept, as Vice Chair Catherine Clark indicated, that access to high quality, affordable health care is a right. It is not a privilege. And we have to make sure that every single American, regardless of zip code, has access to health care in America. But that's a conversation that we are working through over the 116th Congress and beyond. Thank you, everyone.